Hello everybody, and welcome to part 2 of the February 2021 episode of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe World Record Review. Sorry that last month's part 2 didn't have a proper intro. It was kind of a last minute decision to upload 150cc and 200cc as separate videos. Anyways, this month in 150cc, 48 world records were broken across 12 unique tracks. Add that to the 200cc total, and that means we saw 88 world records this month across 24 unique runs. Now, let's start talking about them. Here are all of the 150cc world records that we saw happen in February of 2021.
Before we get started on our first track, let us do something that we failed to do in last month's recap. In it, we briefly mentioned something known as a start shroom, but never explained it. Because the rocket boost in this game is so abysmally bad, it is faster on a number of tracks to buffer a shroom input before the run begins rather than using a mushroom at the same spot on all 3 laps. This is why you'll see players honk their horn before the run begins on tracks that use this technique, since the button for item and horn are the same. We thought we should bring this up now, not only because we failed to last month, but because Rainbow Road 150 is in fact a category that uses this technique, and was the first 150cc world record this month. On February 3rd, Almond reclaimed the world record here from Rokoa, lowering the record by 21 milliseconds to achieve a 159.602. Lap 1 was a solid lap with nothing sticking out. Lap 2 had a good beginning and a decent low trick at the conveyor belts, which is actually extremely hard since you can't really control the air you get from this ramp. It is possible to land instantly after tricking and use the entire boost before the panel, which saves a lot of time. The last turn wasn't the greatest, but a 0.6 lap 2 is strong, especially without getting the best low trick. The first brake turn on lap 3 has some room for improvement, and Almond lost a lot of time missing the low trick after the glider, then got a wide shroom. Optimally, you want to land a bit later on the ramp and trick as soon as you hit it. This not only gives lower air, but is usually a good setup for the shroom. The last turn wasn't the best, with slow braking and a wide line, but since Rainbow Road is very inconsistent, this run was good enough for Almond to reclaim his world record. However, the next day, on February 4th, Rokoa would come back and improve the record by 96 milliseconds to set a 159.506. This was basically the opposite of Almond's run, with lap 2 being the weakest of the run. Lap 1 cleaned up the mistakes by Almond, and the last trick lost some time. Lap 2 suffered the biggest mistake in the run, where he got a very high trick at the conveyor belts. However, lap 3 was extremely good, and the new best known split by a huge amount. There were basically no mistakes made, with a very fast motion glider and last turn. This analysis was once again done by Alberto, and he closes his comments on the run by saying that he believes it is one of, if not the best current baby world record to this day. If Rokoa had Almond's lap 2s, he could still bring this down a decent bit, but since we don't have any contact with either player, it's pretty much a mystery as to what will happen. The current best known splits give a 159.287, so we will surely see a 0.4 and maybe even a 0.3 here in the future. Congratulations to Almond and Rokoa on your improvements here this month.
Up next, we'll be taking a look at Wild Woods, which has one world record set this month. On February 3rd, Scary improved his own world record by 67 milliseconds to achieve the first 147.3 on this track with a 147.373. This came after a long absence, with Scary's previous record being set in August 2020. On lap 1, the biggest time loss comes from missing the edge trick on the first lily pad. The optimal strategy is to trick right on the edge of the boost panel to skip its boost, but still get a trick, which can save up to 100 milliseconds and can be done on laps 1 and 3. Lap 2 was nothing special, and overall, pretty solid. Lap 3 would have been a very fast best split, but he once again missed the edge trick on the lily pad. Fortunately, his ending NISC was really fast and clutched the improvement. The best known splits at the end of February give a 147.166, and funnily enough, Scary would get this exact time on March 9th thanks to his strat change. Stay tuned for next month's review to hear about that one. Congratulations, Scary, on your time here this month.
The third track that would receive a world record this February was Dolphin Shoals. On February 4th, Huyuiro improved his own world record here by a solid cut of 103 milliseconds, down to a 155.217. Lap 1 was pretty good, but considering Huyuiro's best lap 1 is a .325, it could definitely have been better. On lap 2, his wood ramp tricks were fairly high, and he missed the last trick on the eel, but the lap was still a 37 because his driving was smooth for the most part elsewhere. On lap 3, the first trick was really good, barely getting any air. He didn't get the fastest momentum on the eel compared to some of his previous runs, but the rest of the lap was good, and actually the new best known split. Currently, the best known splits on this track, all by huyuiro, add up to a 154.791. A 154 seems far away, but it's definitely possible, so it will be exciting to see when it will be achieved. Or maybe completely smashed by an unexpected player. Stay tuned for March's review to hear about that. Also worth mentioning is that on February 15th, huyuiro's world record reign on Dolphin Shoals became just the third in the game's history to reach 1,000 days, and his time cut this month is now 2 full seconds ahead of his first world record on the track. Congratulations to huyuiro on your improvement this month and for continuing your streak of dominance on Dolphin Shoals for as long as you have.
DS Tick-Tock Clock was next up to be improved this month. On February 4th, Aarón reclaimed the world record on this track, beating out Nasuno by 23 milliseconds to achieve the first 0.6 on the track with a 143.694. This run's lap 1 was great, and lap 2 was just as good. But lap 3 was considerably worse than Nasuno's and was just barely enough to bring in the 0.6. Aarón wouldn't have to worry for long though, because 2 days later, he improved his own world record by 34 milliseconds to a 143.660. This was a much more consistent run. Lap 1 was slightly slower, but lap 2 was slightly better, and lap 3 was far better than his previous world record. The best known splits give a 143.444, and Aarón could breathe a slight sigh of relief as he has established a solid lead over Nasuno. However, little does he realize that this track was about to be completely flipped on its head.
Ladies and gentlemen, DS Tick-Tock Clock 150cc is now a baby track. On February 10th, Alberto would achieve the first baby world record here, and was able to cut the previous world record by a massive 113 milliseconds to achieve a 143.547. Alberto says that his lap 1, especially the first 15 seconds, are by far the worst part of this run, and was pretty easy to consistently off-screen. Lap 2 had a solid beginning, but he lost time at the end of the lap for going wide before the clock hand and getting a bad ending trick. His lap 3 beginning is, quote, basically perfect. However, this would prove to be a blessing and a curse. He had never been on a pace this fast before, so he had to improvise the cog section, and while it wasn't amazing, it was still enough to land the world record. Overall, he says this run was actually pretty good for being the first world record with babies here. However, Alberto would be quick to improve. On February 13th, he would improve his own world record by 42 milliseconds to achieve a 143.505. Lap 1 was once again the weakest in the run. Alberto says he can hit 0.9s pretty easily even with mistakes. He says that the first half of lap 2 can be improved, but the second half was solid. The first turn and shroom of lap 3 were, quote, awful. The turn after the pendulum was wide, but unfortunately the pendulum pace locks you if you're on a fast pace. The rest of the run was really good, and he got launched very far with the final trick so he didn't need an extra MT. Later in the month, on February 26th, Alberto would get his final time of the month, improving by 40 milliseconds to set the first 143.4 on this track with a 143.465. Lap 1 was good enough, but for now, the first 2 laps don't matter very much because of the pace lock. The second pendulum on lap 3 becomes more annoying the faster you go. This run also uses another new strat, found by Army, which is to land directly with a drift from the last lap 1 trick instead of counter slide, to get the MT out in time for chaining the boost with the trick. Since Alberto's pace was good, he had to really improvise at the blue and red section lap 2, and got some weird tricks which most likely lost some time. The beginning of lap 3 was nice, where he drifted and got momentum off the bump before the first pendulum. This run is pretty close to hitting the pace lock at the pendulum, and the driving afterwards was pretty good. However, the ending was, quote, catastrophic. After getting a bad line into the last trick, Alberto got a low trick and couldn't react in time to fit in the ending MT needed for a trick like this. Alberto says he believes that a really fast time will be possible in the future, and that there is potential for a pace break for sure. On lap 1, it is possible to clip the edge at the end and align perfectly to MT trick the last gear, which saves a lot of time. This should allow for 0.7 lap 1s or lower to be hit, and if lap 2 is really good, it should be possible to save a shroom for lap 3 to use after the pace lock. At the moment, Alberto's goal is a 0.3 with the current strats, but he might mess around and try to hit the pace break in the future. Alberto closes his comments by saying how hard it is to convert a track to using babies. People have been theorizing baby strats on this track since 2018, and thanks to help from JenZua and P, the final strats were finally found to make them viable. The best known splits on this track currently give a 143.255, and Alberto currently hopes to achieve a 143.3 here sometime soon. Congrats Alberto on finally changing the meta permanently on this track, and best of luck with future improvements as well as attempting the pace break.
In February, SNES Donut Plains 3 would have its 5th consecutive month with at least one world record, beginning on February 4th when Frog, or better known as his previous username Musuzo, tied Alpaco's world record, achieving a 113.476 of his own. As a result of this run, the top 4 worldwide on this track was within 4 milliseconds of each other, which, considering how inconsistent this track is one of the most unbelievable things to happen in this game. On lap 1, Frog lost a bit of time entering the water after the Nisk, and his last UMT release lost some time as well. He took the turn skip lap 2, which made him end up very wide and far away from the first mole, which lost momentum. On lap 3, he went wide on the first Nisk and in the underwater as well, but everything else was fine and led to the tie. 11 days later, on February 15th, Alpaco would reclaim this world record, improving by 37 milliseconds to achieve a 113.439. Lap 1 was pretty nice, but he did miss the fast first Nisk, which lost quite some time. On lap 2, the driving was good, but at the first Nisk he bonked through the plant, which is slower than a fast Nisk, but actually still faster than a slow Nisk. By the way, fast and slow Nisk just refers to how much time is lost to the off-road. Alpaco described the turn skip as absolute garbage, and it made him lose most of his momentum. Lap 3 was driven very clean. Alpaco says you can drive this track well and still get a bad time, due to the inconsistency. The main time saves on this track are the 3 Nisks and the water entry and exits, which make up most of the track. Alpaco says that the run is mostly average, but he was still happy to reclaim. On February 24th, he would actually improve again, but by only 1 millisecond to a 113.438. Lap 1 was, quote, really bad. He missed the first fast Nisk, and both mole tricks were too low, so he didn't maintain full momentum, leading to this lap being a 26. Lap 2 was nice, but lap 3 was truly amazing, with a really good turn skip carrying the lap. The next day, Frog would come back to reclaim the world record, improving by 9 milliseconds to get a 113.429. In this run, Frog actually went for the 710 coin strat instead of 800, making his lap 1 faster than it actually looks. The 710 strat is slower than the 800 and made this lap 2 very slow. He went wide underwater and the turn skip was very bad because he hit the off-road at the exit. He had a slow second water exit on lap 3 and a decent turn skip, and went a bit wide before the last Nisk. Just 2 hours later, Alpaco would return to get the first .3 on the track, improving the record by 57 milliseconds to achieve a 113.372. Lap 1 was a very good lap, but he missed the first fast Nisk again, which was the main time loss of the lap. Lap 2 was also a very good lap, with not many noticeable mistakes. Alpaco says that lap 3 was a good lap except for missing the fast Nisk. Overall, he is really glad with the progress he made for the track this month. The best splits on this track give a 112.791, but Alpaco says his goal here for now is a 113.0 or a low 113.1, since this track is very inconsistent. Congratulations to both Frog and Alpaco on their records here this month.
Next up, we're going to N64 Rainbow Road. On February 10th, Vincent returned to the track after 161 days and improved his record by 22 milliseconds to set a 120.125. This track suffers from a few pace locks, being the coins on section 1 and the waves on section 2, which makes you forced to stay at about the same pace going into section 3 at all times. The only comment Vincent had about this time was that the motion glider wasn't very good and lost him a bit of time. The next day, Vincent would improve by 2 milliseconds to achieve a 120.123. Sections 1 and 2 were in line with the pace lock, and section 3 had overall slightly weaker driving, but the motion glider made up for the time loss and helped him clutch a new improvement. The best known splits were the grouped together sections 1 and 2 due to the pace lock give a 120.092, which is extremely close to this record. Congratulations Vincent on your records here this month! Hyrule Circuit was the next track to be improved in February. Mr. L, who's held the record here since October 2019, improved 7 more times this month, cutting the time down by 100 milliseconds total. Starting it off, on February 11th, Mr. L lowered his 144-day lasting record by just 1 millisecond to set a 147.930. A small change starting this run was to do a neutral trick instead of a right trick at the last ramp to get a better line towards the finish line. 2 days later, he improved by a larger 37 milliseconds to get the first .8 here with a 147.893. This run was overall more consistent despite lap 1 being relatively weak. On February 14th, Mr. L improved twice, first by 16 milliseconds to a 147.877, and then, very shortly after, by 10 milliseconds to a 147.867. Unfortunately, this improvement came so quickly that we didn't have time to get a video of the .877, but the lap 2 was actually the new best known split. On Hyrule Circuit, lap 3 is supposed to be a bit faster than lap 2 because of the ending ramp strat not needing to charge a UMT into the next lap. So the fact that this run's lap 2 was faster than its lap 3 truly shows how fast it was. Also, the .867 improvement came in just 7 minutes, which shows how consistent Mr. L is on this track. On February 16th, he improved once again, this time by 15 milliseconds to bring the record down to a time of 147.852. Lap 2 was weaker than his previous runs, but lap 3 was really good. 3 days later, on February 19th, Mr. L improved by 5 milliseconds to get a 147.847. This was overall more consistent than the previous run, but some time was lost during lap 3. Finally, on February 23rd, Mr. L would set his last record of the month, bringing the record down to a 147.830. The pace going into lap 3 was slower than most of his previous records, but he clutched out a huge .4 lap 3, which is still the current best known split. The overall best known splits give a 147.754, so a .7 here is definitely possible, but will be difficult. Congratulations to Mr. L on your many improvements here this month, and best of luck on future runs.
Next up, we're going to Thwomp Ruins, which saw 9 records over the course of the month. On February 15th, Chlorine improved the record after 222 days to take the spot from a tied record by Scary and Alberto by just 1 millisecond, achieving a 150.938. Chlorine says that this run was very weak, and he only got world record because of the new strat. At the first shortcut, with the right alignment and an early SMT release, it is possible to go very far to the right and do a hop on the border to cut through the grass. Chlorine went too tight at the shortcut on both laps 2 and 3, so he couldn't do this strat, losing around 100 to 150 milliseconds in total. Also, when you're entering the water to perform a double MT, you can get what's called a fast landing, where you release your MT right as you hit the floor, drifting into the water and getting a small boost. This saves around 30 milliseconds, but Chlorine missed it in this run. Also on lap 2, he went too tight before ramp Nisk, so he had to do the old strat, which gets no MT trick on the ramp. On lap 3, Chlorine implements a new motion glider strat, originally found by Army. If done optimally, this can save 100 milliseconds overtaking the underwater path well. Chlorine was actually on much better pace than Scary before the ending, but lost time getting a long slide before the glider trick and just barely beat him. On the same day, Alberto came back and reclaimed his record, improving by 8 milliseconds to set a 150.930. Alberto would improve here 7 more times over the next few days, so we'll just go over the most noticeable parts about each run leading up to the current record. For the .930, Alberto had the right alignment for the grass hop after the shortcut on both laps 2 and 3, and saved a bit more time on lap 2 than on lap 3. A few hours later, Alberto improved by 21 milliseconds to a 150.909. Here, he hit a wall at the beginning of lap 1, losing about 30 milliseconds. At the end of the run, he barely messed up the timing with the slide before tricking on the last glider, which lost an astronomical amount of time. The next day, Alberto improved twice, first by 33 milliseconds to a 150.876, and then by 2 milliseconds to a 150.874. The .876 had a bad ending again, where Alberto landed too early from the glider. What you want to do is land right on the ramp and cancel the glider as you trick, but here the glider was cancelled before tricking, losing around 40 milliseconds. The .874 had the typical mistakes, and Alberto was happy to sneak in a record with Roy in between all the Waluigi runs. On February 17th, Alberto improved twice again, first by 28 milliseconds to a 150.846, and then by 6 milliseconds to a 150.840. Then, on February 19th, Alberto got his final 2 improvements. First, by 99 milliseconds to a 150.741, and then by 24 milliseconds to bring the record down to a 150.717. Alberto was happy to finally hit a run with some consistency. Lap 1 is great for his standards and only 30 milliseconds away from his best split. Lap 2 didn't have a grass hop or fast landing, but Alberto got lucky and clipped the part of the wall that sticks out at the end of the underwater section, which gives a tiny boost. Lap 3 was extremely fast, and the new best known split. Alberto actually doesn't know why it was so fast, since he didn't get the grass hop and didn't feel that the motion glider was that good. Thwomp Ruins has a lot of room for invisible time loss, meaning losing time for a barely wrong line or input, so this lap was basically just driven well. To close out his comments, Alberto said he is glad with the progress he has made on this track, but there is still a lot more room for sure. He says he could maybe get a 0.5 with a good enough run, but is still unsure if he will ever return to the track. His lap 1s are much worse than Scary's, which he says heavily limits his potential on this track. The best known splits currently give a 150.613. Congrats to Chlorine for getting the first record on this track utilizing Motion Glider, and to Alberto for lowering the track by over 0.2 this month.
February also saw some activity on SuperFX Subway. On February 18th, Army returned to the track to improve his record by 3 milliseconds and set a 140.885, the first record here of 2021. Lap 1 was above average, with everything going quite well and no major mistakes. Lap 2 had a shaky few first turns, but the rest was solid and the lap was only 50 milliseconds off of BKS. Unfortunately, Army says that lap 3 was weak. The first 2 turns were wide, and right before the NISC he landed early and too far to the left, so he couldn't start soft drifting instantly and had to avoid the wall. The NISC itself wasn't the best either since the SMT was delayed from not soft drifting. This lost around 50 milliseconds overall. Later that same day, Army would improve by 12 milliseconds and get a 140.873. Lap 1 was near perfection until the NISC, which could have been better, and the 2 mini turbos afterwards weren't the best, losing some time. On lap 2, the turns before the shortcut were quite wide and lost around 30 milliseconds overall. The shortcut itself was actually very tight. The second hop was unnecessary, but it gave some momentum. The double MT trick section was not the best, unfortunately, as Army landed quite early from the first trick, which cost a bit of time. For the second trick, he landed too far to the left, and as a result couldn't soft drift immediately. Lap 3 also suffered from this double MT trick section. He was actually too far to the right and hit the wall while tricking off the ramp, which cost over 50 milliseconds. Because of this time loss, Army went for a risky NISC and released his mini turbos very fast. These risks paid off and brought in a small improvement. On February 20th, Army improved by 37 milliseconds and got a 140.836. Lap 1 was clean and could have been a new BKS if the trick before the NISC wasn't this low, costing around 50 milliseconds. The first few turns of lap 2 were super clean, and so was the shortcut. The only noticeable mistake here was a low first empty trick, which made for a slow second empty trick, losing around 30 milliseconds overall. Lap 3 is where Army gets upset. The first half was good, and it was on pace for a mid .8 lap. However, the double empty trick was, quote, hot garbage, and lost around 80 milliseconds. The second MT was released too late, which made the trick not only low, but also really slow. Army finished the run, took a 3-minute break, and started playing again, only to improve on the very next try. This was a 19 millisecond improvement and brings the record down to a 140.817. Lap 1 was an excellent lap, no complaints about a low .0 lap. The first and second turns of lap 2 weren't the best, losing around 50 milliseconds. At the empty tricks, Army landed too far to the right before the NISC, which lost some time, but not as much as the earlier run. Lap 3 shortcut was quite wide, but he actually didn't lose that much time. After a slow and high double empty trick, Army didn't go for the double mini turbos after the NISC since he was shaking so much, and just hopped after the first empty instead. Overall, Army isn't too frustrated with this run, and is especially happy he got it after that abysmal .836. The current best splits give a 140.612, and Army says his goal for now is a lower .8 or even a .7. Congratulations Army on your improvements this month.
Next up, we're heading over to N64 Yoshi Valley. On February 21st, Frog got his first world record on this track, ending Alberto's reign here since 2019 by setting a 158.954, just 6 milliseconds faster than the previous record. On lap 1, he didn't get air exiting the first bridge, costing around 20 milliseconds. Frog implemented a small new strat exiting the tunnel, tricking very early instead of waiting until the end of the ramp. The hops after the shortcut and the beginning to lap 2 could have been a bit better, but the snaking section after the straightaway was really good, which Alberto says was better than his previous time and the reason Frog got the record. Lap 2 was BKS at the time. Entering lap 3, he lost a bit of time with the first turn being wide, and a few minor mistakes throughout the lap added up to a fairly big time loss. Wasting no time, Alberto would reclaim his record here the very same day by just 1 millisecond to set a 158.953. Alberto would improve 2 more times on the 21st and set his final record of the month the very next day. Since it was Alberto's first time trialing the track in a while, he was a bit rusty, but said that Frog's Ghost was fun to race against and helped him get back into it. Lap 1 had below average driving and a really bad shortcut exit, losing around 40 milliseconds. Lap 2 could have been better, and on lap 3 he released the Super Mini Turbo after the bridge too late. Overall, Alberto knew the run had a lot of mistakes he could have easily avoided, but was happy to barely reclaim and was motivated to push the track further down. In less than an hour, Alberto would get his 158.825, a 128 millisecond improvement. While lap 1 had no noticeable mistakes, it lost a bit of time everywhere, making for a weak lap. Lap 2 had a strong opening, but the turn after the bridge trick wasn't taken properly. Alberto says he got a low battery warning during lap 2, but fortunately was able to stay focused. At the snaking after the ramps, he was too close to the fence but had a good reaction time and released his last mini turbo earlier than normal and just turned the analog stick without doing a hop. This may have lost a tiny bit of time, but nothing too major. The rest of the lap was pretty good except for the shortcut, which had a pretty high entry. Shortly after this run, Alberto would improve by 3 milliseconds, setting a 158.822, which Alberto described as quite the opposite of the previous run. Lap 1 was really good and BKS by around 40 milliseconds. Alberto says it was possible to gain a bit more here, but he was happy to get the lap in a run. Lap 2 had a shaky beginning, a bad turn after the first bridge, and a wide turn before the shroom. Lap 3 didn't go as wrong, but could have been better. The turn before the rotating egg was great and made the run a world record. Alberto barely missed the mini turbo chain right at the end, which lost around 15 milliseconds. The next day, on February 22nd, Alberto would get his final improvement of the month, beating his time by 91 milliseconds to set a 158.731. The lap 1 exit was pretty wide and the shortcut had weird airtime, but fortunately, there were no big mistakes in the run after that. Alberto says he has 0 complaints about lap 2. It was overall really clean and actually the new BKS. The SMT before the shortcut on lap 3 was released slightly too late, which could have saved around 15 milliseconds, but all in all, it was still very good. Overall, Alberto is very satisfied with reaching his 0.7 goal. Since lap 1 wasn't very good, he may try to improve at some point, but he would be completely fine with this run if he didn't. The best known splits gave a 158.626, so this run is already strong anyways. Congratulations to Frog and Alberto on your records here this month.
Mario Circuit was the next track to be improved this month, starting with a 33 millisecond improvement from K4i, reclaiming his world record from Etena after 242 days and setting a 145.703. When playing this track, K4i keeps motion controls on the entire time instead of just pausing at the glider. Because of this, the regular driving doesn't always look the cleanest. Laps 1 and 2 were average, and on lap 3, he got a low trick at the first ramp. This low trick is difficult and requires a precise angle to get it right. Unfortunately, he messed up a hop at the last turn before the glider, which made the lap a best split fail. 2 days later, on February 24th, Kai would improve this time by 57 milliseconds to get the first 145.6 on this track with a 145.646. Lap 1 was a new BKS, but Kai says that there is still much room to improve. On lap 2, he did a motion hop using the mushroom, which made the shortcut easier to do. K4i said that this was actually used somewhat accidentally in one of his older world records from May of 2020, before anyone knew what a motion hop was. Kai had no complaints about lap 3 either. The current best splits on this track give a 145.552, and Kai hopes to one day achieve the .5. Congrats Kai on reclaiming and improving the world record here.
The final track of February to be improved on 150cc was Sweet Sweet Canyon. On February 27th, Alberto improved by 17 milliseconds to set a 149.051. Lap 1 was fine, but the blue path trick was high and he couldn't do the hop before the shortcut well. This track is fairly consistent, so the hop strat before the shortcut pretty much determines how your lap will be if your driving is generally similar on all of your attempts. Lap 2 had a wide turn at the double SMT after the cannon and high pink path tricks at the end, but was good otherwise. Going into lap 3, Alberto was on a pace 100 milliseconds slower than his previous record, so he was calm and managed to get a great lap 3. He did miss the SMT to MT chain before the underwater trick, which lost a bit of time, but the pink path hops were really fast and made him align perfectly for the hop strat. For the pink path hops, you want to get fast hops, which is getting a small bounce landing from the last hop into the drift, which gives you a boost and sets you up perfectly to get a lower trick and do the hop strat. The next day, on February 28th, Alberto would improve 4 more times and ended off with the sub. First, he improved by 25 milliseconds to set a 149.026. Lap 1 was solid, but he went too tight after the blue path trick, causing a bad hop and costing the 0.5 lap. Lap 2 had a high pink path trick, but other than that, it was really nice. Lap 3 was going well, but he got slow pink path hops, resulting in a terrible trick and hop strat, unfortunately costing the sub. 20 minutes later, Alberto would improve by 8 milliseconds to a 149.018. Lap 1 was really nice overall, hitting 0.5 laps is pretty difficult. Lap 2 had bad pink path hops, and as a result, a very high trick out of the pink path. Without that, this lap could have been a midpoint 7, which is a great split. Lap 3 was fine, but once again, Alberto got unlucky with the hops and pink path exit. If only one of those 2 tricks weren't as high, it would have been enough to sub. Later in the day, Alberto would improve by 13 milliseconds and got a 149.005. Lap 1 wasn't good for his standards anymore, and a high blue path trick, among other mistakes, cost the sub. Lap 2 heavily carries this run, and is one of Alberto's best ever. The beginning of the lap was, quote, insane, but slow pink path hops plus a missed low trick cost BKS and the sub. Just like the past 2 runs, lap 3 was another unfortunate sub fail. Alberto says that this was the most painful of all of them, as it wasn't the pink path hops, it was the last shortcut line. His weird alignment into the hop strat sent him a bit wide at the shortcut, which again cost the sub. However, Alberto would return to clutch it up and improve by 18 milliseconds to a 148.987. Lap 1 was good, but he didn't get a low trick out of the blue path. Lap 2 had really good driving, but he got bad pink path hops, resulting in a high trick and a bad hop. Lap 3's driving was slightly worse than Lap 2's, but the pink path saved the lap. He got a great line in the long drift and fast pink path hops, which gave him a low trick so he could do the hop easily. Back when he got his first world record here in July 2020, Alberto theorized the sub would be doable by implementing the hop strat on laps 2 and 3, which was a ridiculous thing to go for at the time, so he instead focused on optimizing the track with just a single MT before Shroom. After so many disappointing sub fails, Alberto felt like he was finally free from the track and got it in just in time for this video, with 1 hour left in February. The best known splits give a 148.791, but even a 0.8 is just so unlikely, as every little thing needs to go your way. For now, Alberto will be taking a break from this track, but knows there is still some room for improvement. Alberto considers this sub as one of his favorite achievements in the game so far. Congratulations, Alberto, on achieving such an incredible feat.
Alright, that's all we have for February 2021. We've started to implement some feedback you guys have given us, but as always, if there's something you'd like to see, let us know in the comments. We greatly appreciate your help. Thank you for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next month when we cover the world records of March 2021.